Good morning, everyone. How nice of you to come. I was on a plane from Vancouver, BC last night and had a marvelous conversation. Oh, look at those. Can I smell the sweet pea? Oh, man. Wow. Wait, actually, let's pass them around. There's a little instruction with this. When it comes to you, seeing, and then let your eyes close, and notice the olfactory sense, scent, pleasant or unpleasant, and then notice how it disappears on breathing out. It only works when the molecules are crossing the membranes. And take 2 or 3 breaths before you pass it on. Mine. It's an act of great generosity. Somewhere in my stacks of paper photos, there's a picture. I was in Afghanistan in 70. And I have a picture of an Afghan man, tall as they are, with a hanging. And anyway, he's got a rifle over his back and a rose at his nose. And he's kind of like stoned again, sort of look. And quite something. I always think of that when I get deeply moved by a flower. It's like. So please join me in taking out your great distractor and turning it off. Takes a little longer than airplane mode, but that way it doesn't buzz, doesn't ring. Plus you can actually realize it's not going to do anything while you're here. A good piece of my conversation with this interesting woman I sat beside was that we have no idea how badly these are screwing us up, or our children in particular. The different sense of self. And so, I'm done for now. So who's here for the first time today? There's faces I don't recognize. One right in the front row. That's kind of brave, huh? What if you want to leave? You're trapped. Anybody else first time? 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow, lots. Welcome. Oh, I'd love to know your stories. How do you come to be here on a Sunday morning? So I have a wish for you, which is, I guess the first wish is that I hope this really works for you, and that it really makes sense, and that it transforms your life. And if it does, that's wonderful. If it doesn't, if it's not a good fit for you, keep looking, because you obviously have something stirring in you that's looking for something, for freedom, awakening, love, etc. And we live in the golden age. We are truly a golden age in this way, that the great spiritual traditions exist in Portland, Oregon. And my suggestion is find someone who's been doing their tradition for 20 or 30 years. And it doesn't have to be the case, but keep looking if this doesn't fit. So I invite you to join me in a little Refuge in the Buddha, in a modern rendition. I had a lot of fun yesterday. I had a 3-hour layover in Vancouver Airport, and I set myself up with my guitar in an echoing corridor and played the guitar and sang. It was so fun. Some people came by and others came by and smiled, and I mean, it's kind of a gas to be sort of a beginner in playing in public. It was fun. So I invite you to join me. I take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya. I take refuge in the Sangha Dharma, the way of understanding and love. Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Dharmaya. Sangha, I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of mindful harmony. Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya, Namo Sanghaya. Yay. I'm just back from teaching a 12-day retreat in Nelson, BC, which was heaven, incredible retreat. And I have this disappointing news that the 3 monks from Bengal didn't make it. The Canadian government turned down their visas. Dangerous monks from Bengal. So we've traded emails, and he's going to plan on next year. So that should be an interesting thing. So, what shall we do? Why not just be here? Since we're here, why not be here doing this? And what's this? Whatever's happening. And to help ourselves kind of get a little focused, a little direction, we might notice that we're alive. The body is tingling, vibrating, warm, cold, there's pressure. And wonder of wonders, it's also breathing. And there was a miraculous moment for each of us when our mother could no longer breathe for us because the umbilical cord had been clamped or cut. Carbon dioxide built up in the body, and then there was that which has gone on now pretty regularly. And will continue to do so until our lease expires. And a remarkable thing about paying attention to the breath is that the only place and time that breathing actually happens is now. And so any time we are attentive to and present with the actual sensations of the breath, we are not lost in the fantasy, trance, imagination of the past, nor in the future, which is a similar construct. So we can actually operationalize the Buddha's advice, try to live in the present moment. By being home, by being present here with this miraculous breathing in and breathing out. And it's the actual sensations, the actual life of the tissues. Awareness meets life. And as one deepens this kind of practice, it's really not uncommon to discover that we're actually not paying attention to the sensations. We're actually with some kind of an imagination or a fantasy or an image. It's one of the things that I did on the retreat, was to ask each person individually, what is it you actually do when you're meditating? And it's really quite remarkable what one finds out about. Well, I breathe in through the soles of my feet, and then Kuan Yin energy comes in, and then this happens and that happens. And then I breathe out through the crown. And while these other practices are worthy practices, they're not insight meditation. And what our interest is in this practice is to be there with the bare bones, so to speak, of life experience, the actual sensation of breathing, which has a beginning and an ending, each breath. In fact, which is itself, from beginning to ending, constant, utter change. And particularly for those of you for whom this is your first time here, though applicable for many usually, this is not a practice where you have to stop your mind. And it's a very common misunderstanding that I can only meditate if I can stop my mind. In this practice, when you discover the mind wandering, or more accurately, when awareness itself discovers the mind wandering, simply gently come back to your breath. It's not a mistake, it's not a problem, it's not because you're doing something wrong. Even if that wandering is a lot of worry or even self-hatred or fear or wanting, greed, it's all treated the same way, which is kind of like we've gone to the movies and the movie is presenting us with worry right now, but fortunately it's just a movie, and we come home to the breath. When we practice in this way, meditation becomes profoundly restful. And the only goal is to be right here and now with this breath, with this body sitting. as you will already have discovered, this does take some effort of a certain kind. It's not effort that requires furrowing of the brow and tensing the body. It's an effort of intention or redirection. Sometimes the metaphor of training a puppy is used. No, come, sit, stay, come, sit, stay, come, sit, stay. But just as with a puppy, violence has no part in this. From the outset, this entire practice is based on gentleness, kindness, love, wisdom, persistence. And please notice that each breath really does come out of nowhere. You breathe out, and often there's a pause. The body is adequately oxygenated. And then the hunger for more oxygen arises, and breathing in occurs. In general, in our lives, we are constantly moving. We move away from discomfort and toward pleasure. And we do this habitually and unconsciously. Now we're throwing quite a wrench into the mind's activities. Because instead of moving immediately when there's discomfort, we undertake a spiritual training which invites us to bear discomfort, at least for a time, to study it, to be present in it. So the paradigm goes like this. There's pain somewhere, you notice it, the mind notices it, come back to the breath. It comes again a little loud, more loudly, come back to the breath. Comes a third time, quite loudly, you thank the breath. And then you turn toward what we call pain, and you dissolve into that. Meaning, you soften, you relax, you allow it to be what it is. Perhaps you contemplate that thousands or millions or tens of millions of other people are having the same pain at the same time. And when we take pain as our meditation object, it can become very interesting. Is it solid? Does it last forever? Is it solid for even a nanosecond? What are the thoughts that accompany it? And when you can, come back to breathing in and breathing out. Rest in your breath. Meditation of this kind will reveal what's happening below the level of awareness. we studiously or emphatically perhaps live our lives in such a way that we never just stop like this. We have an unspoken belief that if we just do enough or experience enough pleasant stuff, that we'll finally arrive somewhere and be content and happy. That never happens. Moments of pleasure and contentment arise, but then life sweeps on. Most people will never do this. This could never be a mass movement. Never was, really. Even in the Buddha's time, many to most of the people who met him weren't interested. But there are some who do become interested, and those people are willing to pay the price of conscious suffering. There's plenty of unconscious suffering, just look at the world. But to actually choose to sit still and turn inward and face the mind, nose to nose with your own mind. Please don't hear this gong as the end of meditation. This is the first of two gongs, kind of a call to be really present. And even the second gong isn't the end of meditation, it's simply a recognition that we're transforming into a different practice, a different application of the same practice. Let's do a little poll. Who experienced sleepiness? I discovered this thing's tired. How about wanting? Ooh, so the lusties are winning over the sleepies so far. How about wanting not, disliking, aversive? Oh, that's close. I think I'm going to call lust the winner so far. How about restlessness, agitation, jumping around? Restlessness wins. How about, on the other pole, mindfulness? Oh, mindfulness, prominent. How about curiosity, investigation? It's like, what is going on here? How about energy, persistence, making some effort? How about joy or delight? Tranquility. equanimity, accepting whatever came. And concentration, mind focus. One. Isn't that interesting? So the enlightenment factors, the factors that tend toward freedom, were much more prominent than their compatriots on the suffering side. It's so wonderful to sit in a room with silent people. Wow. In order to guide me this morning, I have put a basket of pens and pencils and pens at the back of the room, and some little slips of paper, and there's the black bowl that was my eating bowl in Burma 40 years ago, 30 years ago. I always want to say 100 years ago, but that's a bit of an exaggeration. And if you have a question you'd like to pose, I invite you to put it in there, and we'll have Jim lead the mindful movement and then have a little pause after that. So I invite you to, and obviously I wouldn't be able to get to everything, but I'll read them all, and then we'll know what the questions are that we're holding. So, Jim, are you ready to lead the dance? Oh, there are some keys here. I know. A Mazda, a little Mazda symbol. Petco Pals. There. Have you been? Yay!
No,
Dang. You know what? I recommend, I get no kickback from these people, but Tile. Find Me Tile. It hooks up with your phone, and then you can always find them. If you're walking away from them, the little circle gets open. If you're walking toward it, it gets closed. And then they chirp. I found them this morning. I'd been away for 2 weeks, and my keys had moved, and there they were. So that's my marketing for Find Me Tile. For you?
thank you. I'm going to slide this back.
I'll take it with me.
Okay. Oh, that's right.
Kidville.
So we sink into our connection with the floor, bottoms of the feet touching the surface, and sensations of pressure probably, or some sort of stimulation. And if we move from side to side, that stimulation changes. And in this room, there also changes the sound, because there's lots of old boards that creak, not just in this body, but in this body. Then we get a sense of the space that this body occupies. And even though the space doesn't change, the notion of change occurs when we sink into the knees like we're occupying less space, and then we're occupying more space. It's not true, but it's a notion. We sink into the earth and then we rise. But can we stay with that feeling of space the whole body, space is changing shape. And this time, when we come up, we'll let the arms float. There's quite a bit of change in the shoulders. And I have a habit of kind of flicking my fingers at the end of the gesture. I don't know why that is. It's a little signal that one cycle is finished and the other cycle is getting ready to go. Because we're resisting gravity, so there's a little bit more effort required to lift than to surrender. We still monitor the speed. We don't just let the arms flop, but we put a little more attention into lifting and just slightly less to surrender. And then we'll lift and then open and feel the change in the shoulder sockets and the sternum and the rib cage, and then relaxing those stretching bands of muscles. So there's a part of us that's monitoring this whole thing. Am I doing it the same as the person next to me? Am I going to hit the person next to me? It's not really a strike, it's a blessing. We are connected. Might as well acknowledge that. Bonk. And then we'll stretch overhead and feel the change in the spine, in the shoulders, in the arms, crossing from one side to the other, painting a rainbow. And there's still a part of us monitoring the speed. Am I going the same speed as everyone else? Then reaching up, turning the palms out, we separate the clouds, and then rise up the center with the palms up, turn the palms, and then press out. Feel what changes in the forearms. We scoop up, turn over, and press out. And feel the hips. One hip pulls back, and we look to the side, then we release that hip forward, the other one pulls back. The feet feel different with each gesture. They have to work with the hips and the shoulders to make this work. So we're occupying the same space, but we're kind of filling a dynamic living space with more energy, with large movements. And then surrendering to gravity and then lifting all the way around takes more energy, takes more attention. How does this circle get created? By shoulder socket, shoulder blades, neck, arms, hands. And the lungs have to support all that. Now we're going to lift across, lift one heel off the floor, and feel the pressure in the other foot. And then the reverse. So we pause a little bit at the end of the stroke and notice all the weight's on one leg. And if we turn and gaze at the moon, there's a lot of weight along the back of the hip and the spine. We're twisting and holding the arms up at the same time. Lots to attend to and enjoy. We have this flexibility, we have this fluidity in the body. It might not always be so. Pressing across, the weight shifts, the hands change position, one hand moves through space. Then we'll reach across, focus on the palms, and the other hand towards the earth. Draw the cloud across the sky. When we get to the other side, switch. And if we focus on the upper hand, it kind of synchronizes all of our attention. Focus, but we still know that there's a shadow underneath. But the focus is right in the center of the palm. And there might be different shadow patterns on this cloud as it goes by. It picks up the light differently in different positions. Seeing and knowing it. Then releasing, opening the gaze softer to the whole area and splashing in the sea, trying not to slap anyone. And then changing direction, scouting out, where's the space for me over here? And switching around again, riding the waves. And switching. It's much easier to stay in touch with everybody else's movement because of the floor. And opening the arms, coming forward and turning the wrists. Lots of sensations in the forearms, in the palms, the shoulders. And switch. Okay, I don't want to stop. That was fun to watch. All right, our feet are under our shoulders, and relax the shoulders, relax the knees, sink, make a fist, and let the dragon rise from the sea. The weight's not shifting, so the floors aren't talking, floorboards. All right. right, let's spread our wings and fly with the cranes. And then turn the wheel. Large movement, lots of sensations everywhere. Hips and shoulders and hands and feet. And changing direction, we unwind. And back to the center, finding that composure, and then experimenting, one arm and one leg. How's the balance today? You can give yourself a number on a scale from 1 to 10. Do it early in the morning before coffee and then after, and see what happens. Okay, then composing ourselves around the breath. A living organism, the building, breathing as a whole. And let's do that a couple more times. And coming to stillness, finding a sense of balance, front to back, left to right, sinking a little bit into the knees, allowing the shoulder blades to come together just like a 1/4 of an inch to open up the chest a little bit. What's the mood when the body's relaxed and yet open? There's a little bit of taking a posture or invoking poise by bringing the shoulder blades slightly in. If the shoulders are down and slumped, there's a different mood. Just try it. Turn your hands so your palms are out and lean forward and feel the spine and the response in the mood when you open and bring your palms forward and sink. And then release the palms. Let's just let them hang. So sometimes if you just make a gesture like that, you can discover a joyfulness in the cells of your body. They really enjoy being lined up like this. So let's sink once more, turning the palms out, reaching out to the side, coming down the center. Bring all this experience together into one package. Exploring all the movement possible with the joints and the toes and ankles and hips and shoulders and hands. And then bringing our hands together, acknowledging our wisdom and compassion for doing this together. It always feels best. Take care.
If you're working on writing a question, please keep at it. I'm the commercial announcements. My name is Kate, and hi guys. I wanted to thank Gary and Nan Leroy for holding the fort for Robert while he was gone. It was really rich to have some wonderful new thoughts and ways of sharing information. Quickly through the announcements, I understand there's still room at Brighton Bush. It usually does quite fill up, so please go to the Brighton Bush website or go to our website to get signed up for that if you're interested. Keep on your calendar August 13th. There's going to be another music jam here. And October 15th, that's a Saturday, a 4-hour retreat if you're interested in formally taking refuge. All of our events and activities are on our website. Steve, raise your hand. Steve designed and nourishes our website, and it's beautiful and we love it. I will be doing Dharma consultations today, so if anybody just wants to chat about anything that's come up during the talk or the morning, we have a sign-up sheet at the back of the room. So there's an opportunity just to chat for 20 minutes or so in a private conversation. And I would love to see you there. And if you've never been to hospitality, please do come and join us. You go through this door and there's goodies. There's all kinds of sweet things that our volunteers have prepared for us today. I still need volunteers. If you have any interest, please see me. We are short a volunteer coordinator and a hospitality coordinator as well, unfortunately. So please do let me know. Another thing that we also really need your participation in is the financial life of this community. If it moves your heart to support this practice and an opportunity for other people to learn about it, please donate using the bamboo box at the back of the room, or you can go online and either become part of our ongoing giving program. It's called the Stewardship Circle, or just a one-time gift that we would truly appreciate. I think that's about it for today, Robert. All yours.
The questions are, can suffering be seen as the futility of seeking an antidote outside our, I can't make out the last word. And then in the guided meditation, you mentioned this practice illuminating that which is, quote, below awareness. What does that mean exactly? And I'm a therapist who specializes in trauma. How do I assist people who are new to meditation overcome hypervigilance enough to access the benefits of meditation? Often they experience such anxiety about relaxing they can't allow themselves to even start. And they may even have panic attacks. What is a good door to offer? I just had the extraordinarily incredible privilege of being with 17 people who spent 12 days going inward. And some of them encountered in one case, anguish and regression such that this person was curled up in a fetal position on the floor, wailing and kicking and crying. And I was called to be with her, and I got to sit at her side and remind her to be sure to keep her mindfulness turned on. And to assure her that it was perfectly fine that she was doing this and she was safe. And she had the extraordinary blessing that she went through this and slowly reintegrated. And then there were several, it's like something that big, it's like an earthquake. There's sometimes aftershocks. And there were aftershocks for a couple of days. But a healing happened for her that is life-changing. I have in my own progression over the years had similar extraordinarily deep dives into the pre-verbal desperation that I experienced. Not everybody has to do that. It's not a sign of particular quick enlightenment or anything. But some of us have really, really deep, we have we all have really great and deep disappointments. Being born as a human is a remarkable opportunity. And it's fraught with dukkha, the Buddha called it, unsatisfactoriness. Some of us experienced, we come in basically formless, no ego. needs and wants, and we give our parenting figures almost countless opportunities to show us whether the world is a loving, sensitive place or not. We're hungry and we cry, and if we're well attended and there's enough food, there's not a famine or a war on or something, or our parents are not schizophrenic or alcoholic, and the parenting figure comes and feeds us, and we know that all is well in the world. We also get some comforting, and then we pass out. And we've gone through the bonding cycle, and we are comforted, and we make the unspoken decision: the world is a safe place, and there's a region of the prefrontal cortex that gets stimulated, and we learn how to be empathic, how to have empathy for other people. It's not there at birth. It has to be developed through relationship. Some of us have the experience of too much intrusion. The parent is too much, to the point of abuse. And others, it's too much distance and neglect. And sometimes it's too close and then too far. And we develop different strategies of attachment from that. And then it affects every relationship in our lives. Big jump. I have, again, the privilege here at PIMC of meeting with many people individually, and something that is pretty much ubiquitous, my favorite English word, everywhere. Many people, most people have difficulty establishing a daily practice. Why? It's too painful. Why do we have liquor stores everywhere? Tobacco everywhere? Telephones, music everywhere. It's because to go naked and to not be stimulated means we experience ourselves. And ourselves, until we do the work that we need to do, ourselves are pretty darn, well, they have a lot of pain. They have a lot of dukkha, unsatisfactoriness. So for a person to make the decision to establish a meditation practice always takes quite a lot of motivation. And that motivation almost always, there are rare occasions, but almost always comes in the form of some bigger disappointment. Someone dies, or one gets a bad diagnosis, or depression is rampant, or relationship failure, or overwhelmed in some way or another. And in that way, the tragedies of life are really of great importance in our spiritual life. There's just this little piece of the Buddha's life story. So Siddhartha was born to the head man, king. There was a prophecy made at the time of his birth that he would become one of two things: a world ruler or a world teacher. Now, of course, his father wanted someone to take over the family business. So in order for him to become not a world teacher, he decided he would protect him from all suffering. And now this is mythology, right? It's a map of the inner life. So there was a summer palace and a winter palace and a spring palace. He was the first to get all the new Nintendo devices that came out. And they always let him score goals in the teams he was on. Teachers never gave him bad feedback. But whatever the case, he lived a life as best one could in the lap of luxury, which is kind of us. Right? I mean, the thing I always come up with when I talk about this is, I have hot running water in my house. Not only that, I'm picky. I get in and it's a little too hot or a little too cold, and I adjust it. Lots of people don't have enough to drink, let alone to stand under a stream of hot water. I mean, not a few people, a lot of people. Small political aside, ISIS arose from a water shortage in Syria that Assad would not attend to, and so they went to weapons. Water, it's an environmental collapse story where the gangs come out. But anyway, back to the Buddha, back to Siddhartha. It's a little like Garrison Keillor getting off. Oh yeah, I was telling you, back where all the men are good looking and the children are above average. Well, Siddhartha was living a life of luxury, and the story goes that the Hindu gods were looking down, kind of like the Greek gods in the movies, and they really wanted him to become awakened because they were waiting for the teachings. So they sent 3 heavenly messengers. Oh, we had a talk on the 3 heavenly messengers. Nan, while I was gone. Thank you, Nan. She's not here. So anyway, what were they? What are the heavenly messengers? Well, they sent a sick person. So he's riding along in his chariot, and he's been protected from all this kind of thing. And he sees this sick person. He says, whoa, stop. And he gets down, and Chana, his charioteer, doesn't really want to do this because the king told him not to. But Siddhartha's kind of willful, and he goes and he sits down beside this person. He says, what's this? And Chana says, well, this is sickness. And Siddhartha asks a few questions. Could this happen to you? We start far away, right? Could this happen to you? Could this happen to me? Could this happen to my wife? Could this happen to my son? Yes. He got bummed. This wasn't quite enough, though, so the Hindu gods sent old age. And he did the same thing. He got down off his chariot and looked. And my first encounter with old age was with my mother in a nursing home for 6.5 years. And I would visit her, and it was pretty shocking. Not only was she old and had had a stroke, but the place was filled with really old, mostly women. The men had all died, but really old people. It smelled bad, and it was hard. I got down off the chariot, and there it was. And then the third heavenly messenger was death, a corpse. And we do our best to shelter ourselves from that, but we do have pets who die. And sometimes we accompany our pets when they make the big jump. I've been present at 3-4 human deaths, quite remarkable. Such an interesting thing, isn't it? Breathing in, out. Strange. So, death. And then That wasn't quite enough, so they sent a fourth messenger, which was in the form of a wandering monk, someone who had withdrawn from the world in order to find freedom. And he had a beautiful smile, and this caught Siddhartha's attention. And he asked, "What's that?" And then Channa said, "Well, it's this person who's seeking enlightenment." And that got the wheels really rolling. And then he wound up abdicating his kingdom and setting off on his quest. And we're sitting here today because he did that. That heading off into the woods to seek awakening was acceptable at that time, somewhat. Young men were doing it. Young women couldn't do it, of course, because of the danger of predation, which still persists in some huge ways. So he encountered, and this is a myth, right? Myth, which doesn't mean a lie. It means a model of our inner life. He in this story represents ourselves when we encounter the vicissitudes, the difficulties of life. And we do our very best to avoid them. 280 channels on TV, sportsing. My wife sent me a little cartoon recently. It's one person in an athletic outfit speaking to someone with a microphone, and he says, well, we weren't sportsing very well today, but last week we were in training and we were sportsing very well, and next week I'm sure we'll be sportsing, and the other team sports better than us, and you can put in whatever the sport is. They're interchangeable. And we get very involved in our distractions, our binge watching of TV shows. It is astounding how much very engaging, remarkable television there is. One could watch it all the time. So, at some point, though, that stops working for some of us, and we're so lucky when it does, because then we have to do something. And one thing that people do is they show up, they walk in these doors. Another way that's a huge thread that, asterisk, remember? Arnold Toynbee, historian, British, in the middle of the last century, said that the great event of the 20th century, when looked back upon, will be the coming of Buddhism to the West. Because Buddhism transforms every culture it enters. And mindfulness is transforming psychology. 25 years ago I was saying it's malpractice to not teach mindfulness. But people didn't understand. I went around talking to doctors, and they were patient with me, but it was like, what is he talking about? And now there's this huge movement, and how wonderful it is that people are learning to do meditation for stress management, and lo and behold, significant at the O1 level, all kinds of syndromes and diseases are improved. And in fact, some of the research shows that a person who meditates 45 minutes a day, so it's a pretty high bar, but a person who meditates 45 minutes a day will use less than half the healthcare dollars over 18 months that they would have otherwise. And put that out further, and it's an astronomical savings. So that interests the financial world. So there's that, and then 15 years ago or so, they started doing some research on depression and mindfulness. And lo and behold, it helps with mild to moderate depression. So there's these doorways. People are entering the Dharma, entering mindfulness training that way. And coming to this question about trauma, one does have to be so gentle with this stuff that well, what is mindfulness anyway? I mean, it is miraculous. Right now, I could say, please become aware that you're seeing. And now you know that you're seeing. How does that happen? Or when your mind wanders, when the mind wanders, and I know there were 2 people in here at least whose mind wandered during that first sitting. I felt it. In the moments when this one was present, I felt it. So you're sitting and meditate, you have this intention, I am going to stay present and mindful of present with my breath and be very focused. And phew, gone. And then what happens? Awareness. Who did that? Where did that come from? One could be bold and say that is the awareness of the universe. That is the Buddha nature. That is the Christ consciousness. And it's that close. You know, we want to make of meditation something very highfalutin and complicated, and maybe if you practice for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years and go to a monastery, that you might get a glimpse of what presence is. It's here all the time. We just don't notice. We don't know to look. So how to introduce someone who has severe trauma? Number 1, of course, is the relationship has to be really solid. And that takes quite a while with trauma, maybe years even. We have to, with someone who's been seriously betrayed in life, from early on particularly, that was interesting. I just had a wave of sadness. That quote, inner child, that young part of us will have to test any number of times and see, is this person reliable? And there's also I don't believe it. They're reliable now, but you watch. If I show you how I really am, you'll reject me. And in fact, I'm going to act out as fully as I can. I'm going to really give it to you to see if, in fact, you can still love me. So it's a challenge to enter into to be present in such a way that a person with real trauma can trust. But then that does happen, and what a blessing for whoever wrote this. What an incredibly fortunate livelihood to actually have loving someone enough to be present with them in trauma, to have that be your work. Whew. I mean, it's as good as it gets, really. So, meditation. Please join me in this meditation. This is inspired by Ruth Denison. Letting your right hand rise, and then move to the right, and move back to the center, and come down. And now your left hand, up, out, in, down. And the right one, and be aware of it rising, moving to the right, coming back, lowering. And let's say also watch your hand. Keep your eyes open. So up it comes up. And notice how it has to turn on its side a little bit, and then it travels off to the left, and then it comes back, and then down. And now with this right hand this time, let's notice how it moves, how the hand moves against the background. So you're noticing the hand moving and then turning, and then there's kind of a blur of background, and then you come back and down. One could offer that as a meditative practice to someone who was very frightened. They don't have to close their eyes. And every moment of being present here is a moment of perfect practice. And any moment of being concentrated on this, the mind will not be doing its other things that it does, the worrying or trauma response. Closing the eyes is probably not a very good idea for anyone with trauma to start with. I gave a little instruction in our guided meditation at the beginning. Here's the paradigm. I've chosen a primary training object, which is the sensations of breathing. Right? So that's my coming back to. It could be any number of things, a mantra or a prayer, but the breath is a really solid one. So I'm breathing in and out and noticing that. And then the knee cries out. Then I come back to the breath. And the knee cries out again. I come back to the breath. The knee cries out a third time. And then, this knee is really needing some attention. I put aside the awareness of breath, and I take the sensations in the knee as my meditation object. This is called a secondary object. And if it's hurting, then I have to check something. Is my posture creating this problem? If it is, and if when I get up, it's gone in 20 seconds or 30 seconds, great. Terrific way to press the edge of the envelope and learn how to bear that which was previously unbearable. If, however, 30 seconds or a minute after you get up, it's still hurting, don't sit like that ever again. And the Buddha sat cross-legged because he was from a small town in India, a village. That's the way everybody sat. If he came from Bolivia or Central America or Bali, we'd all be squatting and saying, this is the ultimate spiritual practice, spiritual posture, because this is the way the master was sitting. And if your knees hurt, if your legs hurt every time you meditate and you're working hard to meditate with your legs, sit on a chair. I gave up cross-legged sitting for the most part years ago when I injured my knee. And this isn't about learning to be in some particular posture. It's about learning to be present in every posture. So back to the example of working with the knee. So that it could be, long ago I was practicing in India and I got kidney stones and I got to practice with pain. And if no one would talk to me, if I could be silent, and I could just turn toward the pain and go in and in and in, it broke up into scintillating, brilliant sensations. The mind just riveted on it. And then somewhere in the mind there was, oh no, I'm going to die in India, and I want my mommy. And this was all happening, but it was all kind of like a magical display in consciousness. And there was very little suffering. I took some codeine after 2 or 3 days, and the suffering really hit for several hours because the mindfulness went out the window. So we can do that with a physical pain. We can also do that with emotional pain, with anxiety and terror and fear and loneliness and jealousy and all these afflictive emotions, though it takes some skill, it takes some faith in the practice. And how we do that is to look for primarily to look for the body base. Right? An emotion is a psycho-spiritual bioelectronic phenomenon. It has biochemistry involved. And so somewhere in the body there's a sensation. And I notice in this particular body that when anger comes up, there's something that happens here, and then there's something in the right shoulder and the right jaw, and the right shoulder is about this. And I haven't done that, and I never hit anybody. I did hurt my hand hitting a wall a long time ago, though. That was kind of primitive. But that's, there's a mammal in here, and anger is about mobilizing our defenses to protect ourselves. It's been essential in our survival as a species. So if there's an emotion happening, take it to your meditation seat. When you're upset, and one of my teachers in India, a woman named Krishna, said, Robert, when you are unhappy, meditate. When you are happy, meditate. When you are angry, meditate. And she says, meditate. Sit down, and it's because the meditation is like the experimental laboratory. And so let's see what's happening. Oh, this is sadness. Well, look at that. It's one of the things, one of the skills some of the people in the retreat developed. This might be useful in the trauma case too, at least generically. When we've been repressing something, when something has not been acceptable to us, or wasn't acceptable to our parents and our community, therefore it's not acceptable to us. It doesn't mean it ceases to exist. It means it's been suppressed, it's been repressed. It's been pushed, out behind me, Satan, sort of. And then we're using a lot of energy holding it there. Sometimes you'll be in meditation and there'll be this a little moment of sadness, or a little wince, or a little something. And when you notice that, that's a very useful sign sometimes that something needs attention. And then you would turn from your meditation object to this little sadness, or a little anger, or a little inchoate. You wouldn't even know what it is. Just, what is that? And this is that second enlightenment factor, curiosity. So I guess one of the things I'm trying to underline here, meditation doesn't mean entering into a trance of concentration and feeling blissful. That's a nice, wonderful skill to have, and may it be true for all of us. May we have lots of that. But if that's all we're capable of doing, we're on hold. One can use meditation to become a trance junkie. Now, that's kind of judgmental, isn't it? Why would one do that? It's because life is too damn painful. And if we figure out a way to numb it down, when I met Ruth Denison, it was about how many years? 9 years or so into my practice, and I had learned to sit down and go dull. But I could sit for 3 hours. I could go to the meditation hall and sit down, and everyone else would get up and go out and walk and so on, and they'd have to stretch, and I was superior because I could sit there. And then late at night, everyone would leave, and I would sit there. I'd always be the last one out of the meditation hall because I was going to get enlightened first. And Ruth got my number very quickly, and she came in one morning, she came and shook me and said, you stay in bed tomorrow morning. You're always so tired. I didn't know that. But I did stay in bed the next day. It was very scary because, number one, everyone was getting ahead of me. And I, what if they got the ring before me? But also, I knew that I was failing. I wasn't, because the structure that had come to believe the only way to get anywhere is to really try hard, and I've got to do it myself. But that day and following days, it turned out that I could be much more awake because I had learned to go into a kind of a dull stupor. That's not meditation. Ajahn Chah said about someone came and bragged about sitting for some hours, and Ajahn Chah said, "So what? I've seen chickens sit on eggs for days." It's not about that. It's about being awake. And let me just put this little understanding in too. There's no such thing as a 5-minute meditation or a 10-minute meditation or a 2-hour meditation. There's only this moment. It's always beginning and it's always complete, right? Let's meditate for 2 seconds. That was complete. We were here, present. Or we could pay attention to the children, sounds, hearing, change. That was complete. Now, it still makes sense to practice for 20 minutes or half an hour or whatever, because the body, the liver and kidneys and the organs that process excitatory chemistry, after 20 minutes or so, it's much more likely to drop into parasympathetic ease, which is good for us. But in terms of developing the presence, the awareness that actually sets us free, that's only 1 nanosecond at a time. So emotions. To live fully in this world, we really have to embrace our emotional side, and it's not like it's bad. I mean, there's such exquisite capacity in us. We're capable of so much love, right? The Buddha said infinite. And infinite love and presence are actually synonyms for the same capacity. When love is there, there's not someone here loving, it's the infinite receptivity. We can be infinitely compassionate. We can take infinite sympathetic delight in others, and we can experience infinite equanimity and acceptance. Those are human capacities. And in order to develop them, we have to be able to experience who we are or what we are otherwise. And we are mammals that survived because we have a very highly responsive emotional system. Right? When a trauma occurs, and trauma doesn't have to be a grand event. Trauma can be just a repeated failure of attention. A childhood spent being raised by someone struggling with alcoholism, or someone who works all the time, or being sick oneself. Right? Ted Kaczynski, I always think of this example. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, was a very normal child, and around 6 or 7 months he got some skin disease that was very, very painful. And it was a long time ago now, of course. We wouldn't do this with a child now, but he always screamed when his mother left. So they said, come back when he's fixed, come back when he's healed. So his mother didn't come back for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And when she came back, she described later, when she came back, he never let me hold him again. This is a less than a year-old baby. He did this, right? His system made a decision during that time, not a cognitive and intellectual decision, but his system made a decision, this world is not a safe place and I'm not going to play. Now, what we would do now is we'd wrap him up in a towel, and he would scream and scream and scream, and we would love him and hold him until he stopped screaming and he surrendered, and then we'd put something really nice and sweet in his mouth, like condensed milk or something. And he would go, And the next day he'd do the same, and then over time he would reattach. So, trauma. I think, coming back to that question in particular, to introduce very simple meditation, on walking meditation, right? To teach the person lifting, moving, placing, or just, here I am walking. The Satipatthana Sutra, this sutra on the 4 foundations of mindfulness, there's a refrain in it. After each teaching, the Buddha repeated this refrain, and until just a few years ago, I always skipped it because, oh man, it's so boring and repetitive. And then I came across a book by a man called Analayo Bhikkhu, Analayo, who wrote about the Satipatthana Sutra. And he said it's repeated after everyone because of its huge importance. And what it says, among others, it's quite brief. It says observing origination factors and dissolution factors. Observing things beginning and observing things ending. It's what makes insight meditation rather than a concentration practice. And then, at the very end, it says, cultivating sufficient mindfulness to know, breathing is happening, standing is happening, walking is happening, showering is happening, driving the car is happening, this is what's happening. That's enough. And so for someone with trauma, it could be simply to plop into sitting here anxious. That already is provoking mindfulness, sitting here anxious. Or walking to my car, or lifting plate, So teaching mindfulness at this level it's extraordinarily powerful. It illuminates that which is below awareness. Actually, I did say that, and it's actually not true. All that which is below aware, that which is unconscious. However, if we have an intention to stay with the breath, for instance, then the mind wanders, and then it worries, and so on. We are provoking the circumstance in which mindfulness might just notice something that previously had gone unseen. That making sense? And that happens momentarily and also over time, such that I've actually been watching I'm very pleased with this development in this consciousness. It's noticing, and I'm not saying I'm noticing because it happens really. It's noticing. The mind thinks about someone, for instance, and there's a judgment. Very spontaneous. And then simultaneously there's noticing, why believe that? That's just a thought. And so there's a gradual unwinding. There's so many prejudices, right? You met this person once and you had this interaction with them, and I'll never like them again. And it's very relieving for that process to be happening in a kind of very clear way without any work now. Not that it's happening all the time, but that's the way when awareness starts noticing those processes. As Ruth Denison put it, hi Ruth, darling, you can no longer get away with yourself. We live in a soup. We live in a worldview. It's almost, well, probably it is, in a religious worldview, which we could call capitalist, consumerist materialism. And it says, if you can get enough goods, you'll be happy. Interestingly, there's a little book called Your Money or Your Life. Very interesting book about living more simply. And we were called citizens until I think it was 1958, at which time we started being called consumers. It's a big difference, isn't it? So we suffer under a delusion that if I can just get enough stuff, a new this, a new that, then I'll be happy. And what's really remarkable about it is most of us in this room, I presume, certainly been true for me, I've had so much new this and new that. You know, I got married 5 years ago, and Jennifer and I had this dream honeymoon in Hawaii. It was incredible. And it came and it went, and it didn't solve the problem because there was still this wanting something. So we could think of, and I tend to think of this, that all the worldly rewards are the consolation prizes. It's like, well, you really wanted contentment and satisfaction and freedom? Well, here, have a nice new this. And not that we need things, obviously, but the nice new thing never does it, because it's not possible for it to do it. So that's the seeking the antidote outside ourselves. And we seek the antidote in substances and in relationships and I've had a pretty good run with children. I have 2 children, bio kids, who are 34 and 30, and we have strong relationships. They've been through lots of challenges, and they're doing okay. They can support themselves now. Yes. And I've had stepkids, and I've got stepkids now, and I can say from 34 years of experience that having children does not make one fundamentally happy for life. And that there may be those of you in this room that are choosing to be child-free, which is the term, and there's a lot of judgment of that. Children don't make a life or not make a life. A career, lots of money. I have a friend who works in the realm of the 0.5%, and those folks aren't happy because they don't have enough. And you could, if your addiction is another $100 million or whatever it is, the power of that, then it's just as bad, it's just as painful an addiction as anything. And if one is in that financial category, one still has sickness, old age, decay, and death, marital difficulties, children being problems, etc. There's no way to not have dukkha in spades. So if we're chasing after the solution, the antidote, through the vehicle that doesn't provide it, then of course it's disappointing. And so that's why we're here, isn't it? We're here because happiness really is possible, and contentment really is possible, and love really is possible, if we start looking in the right place, which is inside. You know what it's like to fall in love with someone or something. There's that incredible feeling that we ascribe to the other person. That feeling exists in us. The other person is a catalyst. And a catalyst is a substance that promotes, facilitates a chemical reaction, but has no part in it. So we tend to think, well, I could feel loving if I had the other, if I had the child, if I had... And that's not where it comes from. It comes from the fact that that's our fundamental nature, actually. If we stop the grasping beast that's always trying to get... It wants more pleasure, less pain, and to become something. That's the second ennobling truth. If we can really learn about that, then the sweet taste of freedom is right there. It's always right there. And how to do that exercise we call meditation, or we call the spiritual path. It's so touching to have you all here this morning. It's incredibly strengthening to me, and I know it's also strengthening to each other to come together. And after we end here in a couple of minutes, through the passageway, we have goodies to eat and incredible human beings to meet. People with whom you can have discussions where you can say, I was observing, I saw this person the other day, and I saw this prejudicial thing happen, and you do that with non-meditators, and the way a dog kind of cocks its head, it's like, what? And then they lose interest. That one needs friends who are similarly turning inward. So I'm very grateful to be able to come back, and I'm grateful to Nan for teaching a couple of weeks ago. Gary, there, thank you. I peeked in. I had a little break in my interviews, and I had 3 minutes when I came pouring in through that camera, and he was here being confident and kind and loving and humble. It's very beautiful. So I want to encourage one more thing, which is do make time every day to practice. Make a spot. If you don't have a spot, you won't practice. And make time. Give yourself, I don't know, give yourself a length of time you'll actually do. If it's 5 minutes, then great, do 5 minutes. 5 minutes is enough to change your life. 1 second actually is enough to change your life when just remembering a friend of mine from way back who was a very severe alcoholic, and he described his turning point, his spiritual turning point, when he was absolutely gone, stinking drunk again, smashing the kitchen furniture again, and suddenly there was mindfulness. And he saw what was happening. Had to stop. And that capacity of awareness and presence, and it's no different from please become aware that you're seeing. Right? It's this mysterious. And that can be there no matter what emotion we're in, no matter what activity we're doing, it's possible to be aware. Because the awareness doesn't come from inside us. It's pre-extant. Pre-existent, I guess would be a better word. Well, I don't hear noise from the children, but it's pretty... is there any... you think they're there in the chute? It's a rodeo. A rodeo image. No? No, let me see if it'll come in a minute. Is there a question or comment from this we could just touch for a moment? Anybody? Please.
Probably very basic. What's the difference between a thinking and awareness?
A thinking?
Thinking and awareness. Why isn't it becoming aware of thought?
Ah. Great question. And basic, right? Fundamental.
Right.
Conjure up an image of your kitchen sink. There's the image of your kitchen sink, and there was knowing it. It's a silly one. Think about a presidential candidate. Anyone. And notice there's awareness of that as a thought. And you maybe think of an opinion about a presidential candidate. And I'm not saying it has to be bad. It could be liking. Oh, I really like this person. And then notice how there's a story. I really like this person. And then my opinion about this is this. And notice that there is awareness of that. And awareness is that which knows. And when we're sitting in meditation, there's breathing, sensations, and there's knowing it. And then the mind wanders, and there's no knowing it. Right? There is unconsciousness. It may be busy thinking. It's singing the song of the self. I, me, mine, mine. I, me, mine, mine. It's all self-referential. I like this, I don't like that. And then awareness comes on, and then suddenly thoughts are visible as thoughts. And that's a huge relief. If we've all been brainwashed since birth about material consumption and ideologies, and we're so programmable, we can be, We can be totally against another ethnic group, or we can hate them, and they can be trained to hate us, and there's really no difference between us except our thoughts. And so when we can become aware of our thoughts, we can become aware of the fact of ideology. And we can be aware of certain really odd thoughts like nationalism, like I belong to this nation, which is a fantasy creation that we then act on. And so does that help? Awareness is the knowing, and it's ultimately, there's not even any one who knows, there's just knowing. Start. Good. Time. So, pull the gate, let them in. Please join us in a big circle, and also come join us after for some community hanging out.
Superman is here. Wow.
Are there any adults who would really like, if you were to let yourself know, who would like to come and join us in the inner sanctum? You're very welcome to. You get a chance to be closer to the candle to blow it out. All right, come on in, Andrea. Yay. Don't be shy. Yay. Oh, good. Look at those socks. Those are too cool. Those are nice. These socks are wearing glasses. So, may I hold your hand? May I hold your knee? No. Okay. How about I just put my hand on your cushion? So, humans, we're lucky to have hands, aren't we, that work still. We can make contact with each other, and with that contact we can communicate so profoundly. I remember the first time I really held hands. It was Tisha Sage. It was so exciting. We could squeeze that hand, and this little squeeze comes back, and it's like, whew, you know someone's there. It's really important. So give the hand on your right a little squeeze. And what would be a prayer, blessing, wish that might spring to the heart? May you be happy, may you be free from suffering, or whatever your intuition came up with. And going the other way now, squeezing the other hand. And notice your own hand is touched and squeezed. Someone wishing you well. Some of us will deflect that. The unworthiness beast comes up. Conditioning, just patterning. And now sending this circle around this wish around our circles, hand to hand and heart to heart. And then out from this beautiful context we're in here, out into the city, the homes nearby, to the hearts of our friends and loved ones. All over the planet, there are billions of us, and remarkably, 150,000 humans will die today, and 190,000 will be born. Central casting is very busy. But right now, there are families that are setting off on that journey of relinquishment and death, happening all the time. Just as there are babies who are breathing that first gasping breath. It's every three a second? 1,000, 2,000, 3. So we're in this journey through life together. Why not love each other? And of course, that starts with really loving ourselves and letting ourselves be who we are. Do we have... You got it. So may all beings be happy, and then sadhu 3 times.
May all
Beings be happy.
May all beings be happy. May
All beings be happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yay, thank you. And now, making that deepest wish we know how to make, and I will hold the table a little bit. So everyone in the room gets to blow. Take one giant breath in. 1, 2, 3, blow. Oh, yes. Whoa, it was hard work today, but we got it. So thank you so much for coming, and please do join us for a cup of tea and goodies. And please introduce yourself to your neighbors before you leave the circle. Thank you for joining us on the internet.